All right, guys. So my recording stopped in the middle of me reading, so I'm going to pick back up. I lived in a house like this when my mother was alive. Now, the memory of it is mixed up with my memory of her. I remember warmth, soft lights, her legs folded into a rocking chair. There was a box with a bright orange fish that she fed, and afterward her hands smelled like the lake in the morning fog. Sometimes I just sat on the shore and inhaled, years later, thinking of her. He turned toward where I sat in the shadows. She died when I was in kindergarten. Aneurysm. I know. I read your file. I couldn't tell him I was sorry. At least he had a mother who loved him, whose departure hadn't been by choice. Did my file, he spoke hesitantly, obviously not having used filing systems in the middle of the forest, tell you what my father did? He was a mechanic. No. I mean what he did after she died. Slowly he dug into the pocket of his scrubs with the hand that wasn't trapped in the sling. A piece of paper crackled as he pressed it against his stomach, flattening it out, then held it up to catch the meager light. It was the picture of Heather Price, with my writing scrawled at the top. I half rose, but my ankle throbbed and pushed me back in the chair. You remember. What do you know about her? I told him the little I'd read about Heather Price's life and death, careful to omit any mention of his father. Each detail seemed new to him, adding color and depth to the image I'd left on his bedside table. He begun swaying slightly and stared at the face long after I'd finished. Then he crumpled the paper, driving the heel of his hand into his temple. She used to watch him. She would smoke cigarettes and stare out the window while he mowed the lawn, but she wouldn't come out of the house. Dad always said that buildings smothered people, and I remember thinking that she was suffocating in there. I can still see in her hazy face in the window. His swaying got worse until I made myself get up and hobble over to him. Come on, lie down. I brought him to the couch, checked his pupils, and gingerly felt along his shoulder to see how swollen it was. He gave one tight nod, looking a little pale, so I retrieved the ice pack and wished for the first time since my mom had overdosed that we kept some aspirin in the house. He relaxed into the couch cushions as I held the ice to his shoulder, and while the condensation dripped over my hands, he began telling me about his childhood. The memories were fragments, scattered over a dozen different houses, apartments, and RVs in the wake of his mother's death. He hadn't made any friends at any of the schools he'd rotated through, although he liked the science and gym classes. They'd visited a sour smelling building full of old people where a man in a wheelchair faced the wall and the woods. He had countless memories of camping, canoeing, hiking, learning about all the plants and life cycles teeming around them. Lucas loved the woods best in the summer, but his father preferred winter, the silent white days isolated from fair weather nature lovers. I stared at the ice pack, afraid to look up, afraid that if I made eye contact, he'd stop talking. But Lucas barely even paused. The floodgates had opened. Something had shifted, and all the wounds he'd held back came pouring out into the faded intimacy of my living room. They'd been camping one summer on a remote lake somewhere near Canada when Lucas got sick. I was fine the first night. We caught fish and toasted s'mores, but I woke up the next morning with my skin on fire and everything hurt. I couldn't even get out of the sleeping bag. Dad thought it was a cold and told me I'd feel better within a day or so. Then I started seeing bugs everywhere. Bugs crawling over the tent, bugs marching on my arms. I don't remember a lot of what happened, but somehow Dad brought me back out of the woods. The next thing I knew, I was in a bedroom. A woman was giving me something to swallow, a woman with long brown hair and flat eyes, like she'd been inside too long. He shifted his gaze from the ceiling to me. I thought it was you. When I got to Condon, I don't know, there was something different about you, familiar. I thought you were the woman who'd taken care of me when I was sick, and somehow he shook his head as if trying to clear it. That's how the doctors were trying to get me to talk. That's why you said you knew me. Why you were afraid of me? He nodded, lifting the picture of Heather Price again. It was her. When I woke up in the hospital today and saw her face, I recognized immediately. I remember her shouting at my dad, and his fist balled into tight balled tight into his sides. I don't know what they were arguing about. I don't know what happened between them. It felt like I was in that strange bed, twisted up with fever forever, until one night, when all the lights were out, I finally felt good enough to get up on my own. His breathing picked up speed, and his eyes darted around the living room, seeing nothing. Someone was moving on the stairs, bumping into the wall, walking slowly. I crept to the door of the room and peeked out, waiting for the noise to appear. Then it did. I saw my father's profile moving across the house, and I almost went to him, but he was carrying something big, something draped over his shoulder. A body, I murmured. I watched him haul it on out the front door, and then a few minutes later, the lights of his car turned on and he drove away. I went back to bed and waited. I remember feeling weak and sweaty and scared, but not of my father. I've never been afraid of my dad in my entire life. I was scared of the body, the way the hair swayed each time he took a step, and the arm that hung along his back, skimming the walls, the furniture. I was afraid the arm would reach out and find me, even though I knew my father was making it go away. He was taking care of it. The sun was up by the time he got back, and he made us breakfast and told me we were going to camp for a while as soon as I felt better. I didn't hesitate. I wanted out of that place. I told him I was ready, and later that day we canoed into the Boundary Waters and never came back. I know what you're thinking, Lucas said, but he didn't do it. I can't explain it. I just know. Have you ever known something about your parents, like the knowledge is in your blood? I had a mother who'd abandoned me and a father who chased ghost ships, trying to salvage the impossible. I looked away as if Lucas could read the legacy in my eyes. My dad spent the last 10 years protecting me, providing for me. He hiked out a few times a year and came back with fresh supplies, boots when I outgrew my old ones, books and science experiments for us to try. He taught me everything he knew, including what the world was like and what they'd do to us if we ever left the Boundary Waters. He didn't tell me why. He didn't need to, because I was protecting him too. But you left anyway. Why did you raid the outfitter store? He covered his face with a hand. In the last few months, Dad became sick, weak. He could hardly stand up, let alone hike out of our camp. When he started mumbling and sweating through his blanket, I made him take the emergency medicine and went to get more. But I didn't even know what I was looking for. I waited until it was night and tried to be quick to not get caught. That was 3 weeks ago. Without warning, Lucas sat upright and grabbed my arm, almost bruising it with the sudden force. The movement brought Jasper to his feet, but Lucas paid no attention. If he's dead, it's my fault for leaving him. There's no one else to blame. And if he's alive, I've still abandoned him. I have to get back now. We need to leave today. Jasper advanced with his ears standing straight up, a nervous growl working up his throat, the rumble of it filling the room. I could feel Lucas's heart racing through the ice pack caught between us. He was too close. I couldn't breathe. I broke away and tugged Jasper's collar, processing everything as I pulled 100 pounds of anxious muscle across the room on one good leg. You want me to help you? I broke off as Jasper whined in frustration. Find my father. We have to go alone. Was he joking? We barely had one working body between us. Lucas, you're not the only person who wants to find your father. The entire world is asking what happened to him. Do you have any idea how much attention your story has gotten? And there's Dr. Mita, Officer Miller, and everyone working the missing persons case. U.S. Forest Service Rangers are searching for him right now. They won't find him. He's not wanted for any crime. No matter what really happened with Heather Price, her case is closed. They won't take you away from each other. He shook his head. It doesn't matter. He won't come out. The Boundary Waters. It's part of him. He couldn't survive in this world anymore. Whatever's killing him is nothing compared to making him leave. And that's what all those other people would do, right? No, we have to go alone. Why me? Why did you come here when you could have been halfway to Canada by now? I let Jasper pull me back a step and looked Lucas directly in the eye, trapping his gaze in a way I'd never done with another patient. I always gave him a way out, room to be comfortable. the space they needed to grapple with their own voice. This, though, was past the point of comfort. I wasn't asking him for a fluent compound sentence. We weren't working through aphasia or a stutter. An escaped psychiatric patient was asking me to reunite him with his potential murder father somewhere in the wilderness, with the Minnesota winter bearing down. Lucas stood up and walked over, ignoring Jasper's warning growl. He stopped a few feet away and reached out to take my free hand. I heard you talking to Dr. Mita yesterday. Jesus, don't you sleep at all? He laughed once. Not really. There's too much noise here. Then, growing serious again, you didn't tell her about the body. She asked if anything made me run, and you lied to her. Yeah, I didn't try to explain, even though he seemed to be waiting for me to do just that. Eventually, he took a step closer. You told me I could trust you before, but I didn't believe it. Not until now. So I'm trusting you, Maya. I'm trusting you with my father's life. The directness in him, the openness after so many sessions of careful avoidance was stunning. I forgot about danger. I forgot about psychology and my job and the relationship we were supposed to have and what was possible and impossible. I had a flash of stumbling through the Congdon grounds on a sprained ankle, thinking of nothing except the trail of blood spreading underneath Lucas's body and getting to the hospital as fast as possible. The desperation had consumed me beyond all reason, and only now was I beginning to understand it. I was the girl who didn't need anyone and made sure things stayed that way, no matter how many therapy students had tried to befriend me, or occasionally brave-hearted guys asked me out. I turned them all down, and I was relieved when Dad went out on the lake and left me with only the dog for company. My life was lonely, but there was something vital in the loneliness, an imperative that I was comfortable, the space they needed to grapple with their own voice. This, though, was way past the point of comfort. I wasn't asking him for a fluent compound sentence. We weren't working through aphasia. Well, sorry guys, I went back a page. Eventually, he took a step closer. You told me I could trust you before. I didn't believe it. Not until now. So I'm trusting you, Maya. I'm trusting you with my father's life. The directness in him, the openness, after so many sessions of careful avoidance, was stunning. I'd forgot about danger. I forgot about psychology and my job and the relationship we were supposed to have and what was possible and impossible. I had a flash of stumbling through the Congdon grounds on a sprained ankle, thinking of nothing except the trail of blood spreading underneath Lucas's body and getting to the hospital as fast as possible. The desperation had consumed me beyond all reason, and only now was I beginning to understand it. I was the girl who didn't need anyone and made sure things stayed that way. No matter how many therapy students had tried to befriend me or occasional brave-hearted guys asked me out, I turned them all down, and I was relieved when Dad went out on the lake and left me with only the dog for company. My life was lonely, but there was something vital in the loneliness and an imperative that I keep the space around me empty and weightless. The only time I let myself get close to people was at Congdon, and even though I loved helping my patients beat down their barriers, it was also so they could stand on their own someday, not near me. My work didn't build relationships, it created more Mayas. Somehow, Lucas had changed everything. If it was possible, he was even more fiercely independent than me. Yet he'd broken out of a guarded hospital room and traveled halfway across the city to find me because he needed me, not a random therapist doing their job, not anyone else they'd tried to send to him. Me. And for the first time since my mother left, I wanted to be needed. I realized I hadn't said anything for a good minute, standing in the middle of the living room, with Lucas staring at me. Yet, he didn't seem bothered by the silence. He wasn't fidgeting or pressing me for a reply, like most people would, and it occurred to me that his life, up until now, must have been one decade-long conversation with his father, where a pause could fill a breath, an hour, or several sky-bleeding sunsets. Lucas, I Jasper's sudden bark cut off the words in my throat. Hair raised, he broke out of my grip and ran toward the front door. Limping after him, I peered through the peephole and saw a police cruiser pull up at the curb with its lights flashing. Lucas shadowed me, his eyes darting from window to window. What is it? The police. I didn't stop to assess the situation, to rationalize. All I knew was that I wanted more time. I grabbed him by the arm and lunged toward the back door. Let's go. All right, so that is the end of chapter 10. So if you've watched this video to the end, do me a favor and drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from and what you would be interested in hearing me read after we finish this book, and I will be sure to reply. Until next time.